Hey guys, Pastor Keith here from Oakdale Baptist Church in Nokesville, Virginia, with this week's 3-minute sermon where I attempt to recap what we talked about on Sunday in 3 minutes or less. So we're going to get right into it. We've been working through the book of James in a series called Postcards From James, and we've been working through, again, we worked through the first 11 verses where we learned that James tells us to count, let, and ask in order to get through our trials. And we followed that up with the completion of his thought here in verses 12 through to 18. And I believe that this section can kind of be summarized. If it had to be summarized in one sentence, it would be summarized in verse 116. It says, "Do not be deceived, my beloved brothers." You know, James knows that we have a tendency as people to believe lies. We have a tendency to think something is a certain way and then believe that lie and then act on that lie. Because it influences our life. What we put in is what comes out. And if we're believing these lies from the enemy and the lies that our culture and our world tell us, we will fall short of what God wants us to be doing in life. We won't actually get to experience that abundant life here and now. And so James doesn't want us to miss out on an abundant life now and salvation eventually. So he says, do not be deceived. He's giving us a couple warnings here in verses 12 through to 18 that, typical lies we believe. And the very first one is found in verse 12. And he talks about that our trials will end. We believe this lie that our trials will last forever, that, this garbage that we face in life will last forever, that it will never end. And we all know what that feels like when you're in the midst of a trial and you feel like this thing is never going to end. I'm never going to see the end of this. James wants to remind us that that's not true. That's a lie. Your trial will end, and it will come to an ultimate end when we face God. And so he tells us to look forward to the ultimate reward, which is the crown of life. And Paul talks about the crown of life. Peter, John, they all talk about the crown of life. And here James is reminding us that we can look forward to salvation and look forward to walking in through the gates when God says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." That's what we want, and we can look forward to that. And that makes the trials that we face in life a little bit more bearable. And, the enemy wants us to believe that these trials are going to last forever, that this is never going to end, and we're always going to be stuck in this. Again, I reminded us on Sunday that, the enemy wants to distract us, to discourage us, and ultimately to destroy us. And we need to fight back against that and not believe the lies that he tells us that our trials will last forever. The second thing that James wants to clear up is that God is tempting us. That's not true. He says God doesn't tempt us. God isn't tempted by anyone, and he doesn't tempt us. Yeah, we see that our faith is tested, and that produces steadfastness that we saw last week. But this week we saw that God doesn't tempt us. Sometimes we have a tendency to confuse those two things. We think that temptation and testing are the same thing, that God's kind of up there in heaven, ready to throw us a curveball just to see what we're going to do. And that's not at all what God's interested in doing. He doesn't tempt us to sin, but rather it's our desires and acting on those desires that leads to temptation, that leads to sin, which leads to death. And ultimately, that's not what we want to be doing, and that will come in between us living an abundant life here and now. And I'm over 3 minutes, but that is a little snapshot of what we learned this past week. I hope you can join us this coming week as we continue through our series Postcards from James here at Oakdale at 10:30.